is celebrating their 10th anniversary, and I would want to associate myself with them and to commend, of course, our Minister of Culture, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, and the foundation and its leadership for the marking of the significant anniversary, the 10th anniversary. Social media policy, we would have spoken about that since we got into government. I'm very happy to report that since our last press conference, the social media policy for public servants has been circulated. I think it has generated enough discussion, so I don't know if the press would want to ask me anything about it. I hope that all the members of the press have seen it. In essence, what it is we have sought to pull together, nothing new, but to pull together into a single document the policy as it relates to public servants engaging. We have said and have always said that it is absolutely critical that our public servants give the very best service to members of the public. They are public servants. We serve the public. And it is unconscionable and unacceptable for people who want the service of our public servants to go into offices and see people who are more involved in ordering clothes online or engaging in any of the social media platforms that we all know. What we have done is we've carved out exceptions, of course, for our public servants who use social media as part of their job to disseminate information, those who maintain websites, as the case may be, for government. And we are asking, of course, our public servants to be responsible. That's really all that we're asking, to be responsible. We understand that there was a lot of chatter about the government not wanting people on Facebook, the government trying to restrict people's freedom of speech. That is not the point at all. We're simply asking our people to be responsible, and it is unacceptable that the public would want the services for which they're paying and are being denied that service because people are more involved in doing other things. So that has been promulgated quite widely, and I'm happy that we have been able to fulfill that particular project. I wanted to announce that Mr. Edson Elliott, who I believe is here, has been appointed as permanent secretary in the Ministry, Human Resources. Miss Ornette Herbert, whom I think I also saw. She must have come in and left briefly, but Miss Ornette Herbert is headed into a well-deserved retirement. She has been working long and hard for a very long time, and she has decided to retire. I want to publicly thank Miss Herbert for her service over the years. She has really, in my view, tried extremely hard to inject professionalism into the service. She's a stickler for the rules. Mr. Elliott, Edson Elliott, as we all know, was hitherto at the high school, the Charlestown Secondary School, for a very long time. Had a very, very good run there, a very successful run. And he has spent quite a significant amount of time managing people. And we thought, when we looked across the landscape, that he was the best person to fill this particular position. And I'm pleased to announce that the Public Service Commission has accepted his appointment and that he should take up the role as of May 1st, I believe. So congratulations, Mr. Elliott, and we commend again Ms. Herbert for her tremendous service to the people of Nevis and to the Nevis Island administration, and wish her well as she now transitions into a different phase of her life. Let me just touch very quickly on a number of issues. In terms of tourism, I wanted to give an update. We are in the throes of our Exposition Nevis for our Tourism Month. I gather from all indications that events thus far have gone very well, and we have had events such as a church service at Fenton Hill Church of God. That was very successful. I'm told we've had a yoga class, which we saw some people attending. We've had a radio quiz, and we've had a very interesting new concept, a village tour for primary school children in the Rollins area. And I'm told over 70 students from St. Thomas's School, Charlestown Primary, and the Ivor Walters participated in that. We've had the Heritage Village Life, which we've become quite accustomed to now. We bake bread and have traditional foods. I'm told they had hot bread and butter done in the traditional box oven. They had mackerel and ground provisions. They even had some ital for the rastas among us, or those who don't eat meat, and that, I'm told, was cooked on site in a yabba pot. And, of course, we had the cultural presentations from the children as well. We also had a hike to the Nevis waterfalls on Saturday the 28th. And we have some other activities coming. I'm inviting, of course, the public to participate fully. Wednesday, 2nd May, we have the hospitality immersion for secondary school students. That will be at the Four Seasons. On the 5th of May, we have the Nevis Adventures, a hike to Saddle Hill. That starts at 6 a.m. Everybody's asked to gather at the Cox Gazebo. Monday, the 7th of May, we have the Jessup's Seafood Fiesta and the Indian Castle Fisher Folks Association event at Indian Castle. So you have two events happening on that day, both associated with fishing, one at Jessup's and one at Indian Castle. Wednesday, the 9th of May, we have hospitality immersion for primary school students at the Nisbet Plantation Hotel. Thursday, the 17th of May, we have the Bank of Nevis-sponsored Tourism Youth Congress, and that will be at NEPAC at 10 a.m. And Friday, the 18th of May, the New River Farmers Cooperative Open Day, where we partner, of course, with them and with the Ministry of Agriculture. Saturday, the 19th of May, we have the Lime Beach Bar and Grill at Pinneys Beach, the Rhythm and Arts. Thursday, the 24th of May, we have the official opening of the Artisan Village at 10 a.m. We also have the secondary school's culinary competition, which should be very interesting. That happens at 12 noon, also at the Artisan Village. And then Saturday, the 26th of May, we culminate with the Expedition Nevis Tourism Awards Gala at the Four Seasons Resort Nevis. Now, if I can just take a moment to talk about the Artisan Village, because it's been a project, as we know, that we have taken great pride in. It is a project, I think, that has created a destination, so to speak, for tourists, particularly those who may come and cruise, but also a place for our own people. And as I have often said, my approach and this government's approach to tourism is that we do it for ourselves first, and if the visitors enjoy it, that's a bonus. But when we clean up our environment, when we create projects like this, we do it primarily for ourselves. And hopefully our people will enjoy it. The Artisan Village, the two last bits of that was to do a bandstand and a gazebo. Those are now practically completed, essentially completed. And we are looking forward, therefore, to a grand opening there on the 24th, where we also will have the high schools engaging each other in a culinary competition. I don't know what they're cooking yet, but I think it'll be exciting to see our young people engaging and doing some cooking there. So it should be a very interesting day. Of course, we invite one and all, the entire public, to come out and be a part of it. Insofar as geothermal, if I can just take a moment to advise that the geothermics report is back. I believe that when we last met, I would have advised that the developers had done the well, and that well now they'd done what they call a flow test to determine the viability of the resource. The geothermics report has come back, and I'm very happy to report to the public that that report suggests that the well is indeed a viable well, that indeed the resource is a viable resource. In fact, they're suggesting that it is among the top 6 reservoirs that they've seen globally, and they are of the view that the heat and the sustained heat is sufficient to generate the necessary power. So I'm advised that the final negotiations are now underway for the financing to deal with the production, and once that is done, we hope by June to see some movement there in terms of the next phase of this very long-awaited project for geothermal energy. So I'm very happy that the resource is what everybody is saying, or we're speculating that it is, and that that report from geothermics that has been submitted now confirms that that is in fact the case. I wanted to look very briefly at some efforts that we have been making in terms of the economy. We've only been here, we've now had some first quarter sort of reports and figures. We are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, that our employment has held fairly steady. Fourth quarter 2017, our overall employment was at 5,478. This is based on Labor Department and Social Security statistics. I often argue that employment is higher than is represented because we always feel that there's some people who are probably working outside the system and maybe doing their own thing, are not accounted for in the system, are not paying Social Security. We continue to encourage everyone, of course, to bring themselves within the system. But when we see these figures, I think we can all appreciate that the numbers might be a bit higher. But 5,478 workers globally for the island of Nevis at the end of the fourth quarter last year. That number has dropped minimally to 5,414. And I think that that represents a drop of, I did the math somewhere, I think of about 90 or so, from 5,478 to 5,414 in terms of the numbers of workers. So we've had a bit of a drop. That has largely been associated. What's the number? Sorry, somebody was whispering the number to me. Mr. Brand, Minister Brand, you did the math? 64. All right, 64. So that, I think, has largely been associated with some fall off in terms of construction, which we note and which I will get to in a moment. But we've seen a good increase in some other sectors. I think Minister of Agriculture and our Deputy Premier, Minister Jeffers, would be pleased to hear that we have seen some growth, job growth in areas such as agriculture. We've seen some job growth in additional areas such as what is referred to as the commercial sector. We are seeing, generally speaking, that jobs are growing in the sectors that we would like to see growth in. We are also realizing that we've had some job loss in areas such as non-established workers and government employees generally. So what we have been trying to project and what we are trying to achieve is that the government starts to shrink in terms of the size of government and the private sector takes up the slack. So that is ultimately where we hope to get to. Right now we are seeing that the private sector has been responding, perhaps not as quickly as we would like, but it has been responding. And we are very optimistic that with the construction activities that I'm about to mention, that those numbers are going to jump considerably. So in light of that, I should say that the hospital project, long awaited, I'm assured by the Minister having day-to-day responsibility, Madam Hazel Brandy Williams, that project should have started today, Monday, with the excavation and the major construction to have started today. So I'm very pleased to announce that. We know that we have been delayed for quite some time. And so that project, for which contracts have long been awarded, we expect is going to increase the number of construction workers. I also just last evening had a conversation with DCK. DCK is the company that has been selected to do the construction works at Four Seasons, and they're indicating that they will be employing between 40 and 70 construction workers as they get that project underway. That project should have started. It has been delayed. It will now start on the 28th of May. And the reason for that, they've indicated to us, is that they had stronger bookings than anticipated for April. So because, of course, the hotel has pledged to remain open, that the April bookings, they said, they had a considerable amount of business that came in that was unexpected, and so they've pushed back the construction to the 28th of May. So that construction should start, and again, I'm hopeful that our construction workers, our contractors, that they not only hear about these things, they put themselves in a position to benefit. That for me is very important, because a lot of people sit back and they ask, what's happening? If you're here, that food sharing down in Hanley's Road, go down Hanley's Road with your plate. That is what I keep saying to our people. Do not sit back and then when you see other people eating, you start to murmur and grumble. Go and put yourself in a position to benefit. The massive investment that we're seeing at Four Seasons, please go out, ask the necessary questions, put yourself in a position so you can benefit. DCK is saying they will need between 40 and 70 workers over the course of that project. They're going to start on the 28th of May, and I'm told by the general manager, whom I also spoke to last evening, general manager at Four Seasons that is, that they hope to finish the first phase by the 10th of December. And the first phase, I'm told, will involve rooms, refurbishing of rooms, refurbishing of the main entrance, refurbishing of the lobby area, and refurbishing of the restaurants that are in that lobby area, which I think are Neve and Coral Grill. So that is the first phase. Thereafter, they will break, and then they go to the second phase, which will be the rest of the project next year, which will be looking at pools and public areas and the like. So again, please, I'm encouraging our people to take advantage of these opportunities and to move forward with this. I'm also pleased to advise that the owners and developers of this project called Spring Air, they're indicating that they're in fact ready to proceed. They have in fact been delayed by a curious problem, and that problem seems to be that they have not been able to get their money into Nevis. And members of the press might well know that we in the Caribbean have been engaged for some time now with this difficult problem of an overly zealous regulatory environment where monies are coming in. In fact, I'm advised that these monies are coming from Australia. Monies are coming from big banks, Main Street banks in major countries such as Australia and the United States and Canada and the UK. But our local banks are under so much pressure that they are demanding to see more and more due diligence and additional due diligence, and on top of that, additional due diligence. So the difficulty now seems to be that there have been some delays. And we are experiencing a situation in our island now where business people are saying it's taking them sometimes as much as 3 or 4 months to open a bank account. That is a disincentive to business. And a lot of the investors that we've been able to go out and attract who are ready to come and ready to invest are saying, but your banks don't seem to want to do business with us. I'm sympathetic to the banks because I recognize that all of them are at risk of losing their correspondent banking relationships. And what that means simply is that if they are perceived to be a risk, then whoever happens to be their correspondent bank, that is the institution through which they move money, can withdraw those services. The Bank of Nevis, for example, advised us that they lost both of their correspondent banks in the same day. And so they have been out there scrambling. Fortunately, they've been able to get others to fill in. And I believe they're now dealing with Lloyds in the UK and Crown agents. But it's a difficult situation. I was in St. Lucia dealing with some matters for UNECLAC, the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I was privileged to be on a panel with Prime Minister Gaston Brown of Antigua and Barbuda and Prime Minister Alan Chastanet of St. Lucia. And this was the focus, this thing that is called de-risking and how much of damage it's doing to our economies in our region and what is being done to try and deal with it. But one of the panelists was someone from Belize, who was the manager of a very important Belizean bank. And he said that they'd had a correspondent bank for 30 years. And one day he got a letter saying that with immediate effect, they're withdrawing their correspondent banking relationship. So even a 30-year relationship, this is like you're married for 30 years and your husband or wife comes in and says, pardon, it's over. No warning, no issue. You don't know what the situation is, but it's over. And so that is what they've had to deal with nearly all the banks in Belize, including their central bank, lost correspondent banking relationships. And so we've had to escalate this and make it a diplomatic issue. We have been working on it, but it continues to bedevil all of us. And we are now being told that some of the banks here are being instructed or directed by their correspondent banks that certain clients they cannot have. So if Mark Brantley is a client and the correspondent bank thinks that Mark Brantley presents some risk, then they're advising you must get rid of Mark Brantley. So you must disassociate yourself. So we're seeing companies, we're seeing individuals, and in this case, I gather that the delay. So we are hopeful that those banking issues will be sorted and the due diligence operation will be sorted so that the necessary financing can be in the jurisdiction to pay the necessary bills to get that spring year development going. So I'm very optimistic that that too will be starting soon and that that too will help with the employment situation. Going back very briefly to tourism, I neglected to mention, forgive me, that we are doing some considerable work at Pinnis Beach. We are all aware that we had a terrible tragedy at Pinnis Beach where a young man was unfortunately killed by the propellers of a boat. And that created quite some shock and consternation on the island generally, tried a tremendous level of grief. I myself would have met with the parents, and I believe the Deputy Premier and myself and Minister Evelyn as well would have attended, and I believe legal advisor would have attended a memorial service of sorts at Pinnis Beach for this youngster. A very, very bad situation, and there, of course, I guess questions that will need to be answered, and this is not the place to answer those questions, but we wanted to do more to determine what we can do to assist to ensure that these types of accidents can never, ever reoccur. And so we've been working down there. I want to thank the Acting Permanent Secretary, John Hanley, and the entire team for the efforts down there. The public should be happy to know that we have now appointed lifeguards at Pinnies. We have now engaged in the demarcation of the swim zones and boat channels from Pinnies Beach Hotel to Paradise Beach. We are currently in the process of building a lifeguard tower down there, and all these are firsts because these were never hitherto existing at that beach. And we hope that with those efforts that we've engaged in, that we will enhance the safety and security of users of Pinnies Beach. We, of course, asking for the cooperation of swimmers, that they do not try and swim outside the marked zones, and we're asking for the cooperation of our boaters, that they do not seek to bring their boats or jet skis, as the case may be, inside the swim zones. And so we hope that by our efforts and with their cooperation, we will avoid any of these types of events in the future. Let me just touch very quickly on the issue of work permits. To say two things. Very exciting development. I'm advised that the IT department is having a week of activities, and as part of that, on Wednesday, they will launch the new NIA website. I have had the benefit of seeing it, and it looks very good, very interactive. And I want to commend them and the leadership, of course, of Quincy Prentice for all the hard work that they've been doing. We're also launching some e-services. We've heard a lot about e-government and the need for government to be a bit more friendly and a bit more agile. And so one of the things we're doing now is to try to create more e-services, so that instead of you having to go and visit the office and visit 2 and 3 different offices to get something done, you can now do it online. And so one of the platforms that we're doing is the work permit application. I'm very pleased to announce that that is a tremendous initiative, that work permit applications will now be available online, where you can fill out the form and submit the forms online. And that for us would be a quantum leap forward. I'm told the first in the Federation that we are now going to allow work permit and residency applications over time as we roll out the system, that all of those will be done online. And now just a moment, if you will, because I think our people at the work permit office and under the leadership of P.S. Wakely Daniel, we're quite proud. I know there was probably the press didn't say so, but certainly there were little murmurings out there about us and the amnesty that we had developed for work permits and residency. And I've always said the amnesty was designed for 2 reasons. One, to let our non-national community know that we respect, honor, and appreciate them being here, and we want them as much as possible to feel welcomed. And 2, to let that same community know that you must feel welcome, but you must also bring yourself within the confines of the law. And to the extent that people were saying that the work permit was a little beyond them, too expensive, they're not paid for a little while and they didn't have the money, we said we would put an amnesty in place. The second amnesty that this government has put in place. And that ran from late last year and ended just in the first week of April this year. And what we did was we said that if you came in during that time and you owed money, we would forgive the debt. And we would say to you, if you're a work permit holder, that to renew your permit, we took the price from $2,500 down to $1,500. I don't believe anywhere in the world you could get a deal as good as that. Not even at KFC, with their Happy Meal or whatever they call it, you could get a deal as good as that. It was an excellent arrangement that we made for our non-national community. We went further to say if you were getting your residency, that would normally cost you $1,500. Again, if you came in during that period of time, we forgave whatever debt you might have had, and we offered you that residency for $1,000. So a good deal all around. And I'm very pleased that the figures I now have suggest that it worked. Because in 2017, we had the first quarter of 2017, 494 work permit applications. Work permits were processed. In 2018, the same period of time when the amnesty was in place, we had 999. So we've jumped from 494 to 999 in terms of people processed. It suggests to me that the idea was an idea that worked in the sense that people were brought in and encouraged to come in to regularize their status and to do what we hope they will do going forward now, which is to ensure that they remain legal and lawful. Now, I've said it before, and I don't want anybody to be upset with me. If we gave such a deal and you did not take advantage of it, you refuse to take advantage of it, despite our entreaties, then you cannot be upset with anybody in the government if immigration comes and knocks on your door and says to you that you are illegal in the country. I don't think the government can do any more than what we've done. And I'm very, very grateful to these 999 people who have come in. I don't know why we didn't make the 1,000, Mr. Daniel, but 999 came in and regularized themselves. I'm very grateful to them, and I want them to encourage others who they may know to come in, please, and regularize yourselves. We want people here. We want and welcome the contribution that they're making, but they cannot live outside the law. They must, every Tutmon, Sam and Bagay in our country must respect our law and conduct themselves accordingly. And it's a very simple proposition. And I believe that for 4 or 5 months, we had the door wide open for people to come in and regularize themselves. And for those who still refuse, well, as I said, they will now have to pay the full price. And if they run into problems with immigration, I don't think that I, as Premier, or any of the members at the Work Permit Office can do more than we would have already done. So I believe those numbers bear out the fact that we would have done quite well in that regard. Let me turn very quickly to health, and just to say that I'm very pleased to announce, in addition to the construction starting today, that we have received 3 pieces of equipment with a global cost of just over $25,000 for our eye care clinic. And let me just spend half a minute to say that the eye care clinic in Nevis is world class. It's second to none. And I want to thank Dr. Hubie and his team who have come religiously and have invested and have partnered with us over all these years to provide quality eye care. I know members in my own cabinet, I won't name them, have benefited from the excellent eye care that's available there. They have laser surgery. And I went there recently, and I was initially disappointed, but afterwards glad that they could not accommodate me because the crush of people. And to my surprise, even many people from St. Kitts are coming over and taking advantage of it. In fact, I was in Miami at some point, I think, last year, and in giving a public speech there to a diaspora organization in South Miami, I was told there that many of them are contemplating coming here to get their eyes attended to, because they say the price of doing one eye here, the price of doing both eyes here is less than the price of doing one in Miami. And they're getting that quality treatment. So we continue to invest just over $25,000 at the eye care clinic. And I encourage all who have any difficulties with their eyes to have no fear of going there. We're getting first-class service there. We also received a bus, a brand new bus for public health, and an EKG machine through assistance from Social Security. Each year, Social Security makes a contribution to the Ministries of Health in Nevis and in St. Kitts. And so we would have received that bus and EKG machine, and we want to publicly thank Social Security for its continued investment in all of us. In terms of staffing, as you know, we have continued to invest in our human infrastructure in healthcare. We have a number of young doctors, Nevisians I might add, who have come home and are all working with us. We have various disciplines now available, such as gynecology. We have access now to neurosurgery. We have an internist that has come back. We have and have continued to try to improve the array of services as we build out our infrastructure and our architecture for health. I'm very, very pleased to announce today that we have now onboarded a psychiatrist. And many who have said that we have not paid sufficient attention to mental health. In the past, we would have used a part-time psychiatrist who would have come to us on occasions, but not regularly being available to us. Well, we've now changed that, and we now have a full-time psychiatrist. I'm told the person should have started today, and I'm very happy for that. We've also today, I'm told, have a public health administrator starting and an environmental health officer. And this environmental health officer, I gather, is from Dominica, who was a qualified individual who had applied and who was affected clearly adversely by the storms. And so we are pleased that we were not only able to provide some relief, but clearly getting somebody qualified as well to assist us with environmental health. So again, I just wanted to congratulate our Minister Hazel Brantley Williams, our Permanent Secretary Nicole Slack-Liebert, and the entire team for their continued efforts in that regard. We have had some pressure being exerted on this government, the suggestion that perhaps we were not taking animals and the rights of animals as seriously as we should. I think the pressure was misplaced, and sometimes when people are passionate about something, that they exhibit that passion in different ways. And we, I think, are all aware of various efforts that have been made to malign the name of Nevis on some spurious basis that somehow we were unkind to animals. I've seen some suggestions that hundreds of animals were somehow being slaughtered here on the island. None of that is true. But nevertheless, I think that it is a matter of importance to note that through the work of the Deputy Premier and Minister with responsibility for agriculture, we were able to partner with a group who are here on island, and that group calling themselves Animals Speak, and we were able to partner with them to create some relief, if you will, and to do something in relation to animals that were being affected. I just want to say that that partnership led to some work being done with Animals Speak, and that work was done during the month of April over a 4-day period. The scope of that project was to install a mass spay-neuter intervention to help control the population of roaming dogs on Nevis. The schedule crucial follow-up dates for waitlisted dogs were unable to join the initial program. The numbers, I think, should be of interest to the press. That 310 animals were treated during the Nevis Neuter project, which was April 6th to 9th. 291 dogs and an unexpected, I'm told, 3 kittens on the last day was spayed and neutered in the 4 days. 310 animals were given flea and tick prevention. They were dewormed, additional medical care if needed, including supportive post-surgical medications. We had 4 international surgeons, 1 international vet tech from Caribbean Spay and Neuter, 2 surgeons and 2 vet techs from Ross University, and their skills were utilized. We also had over 100 Ross veterinary student volunteers and other volunteers. We, I believe, ought to credit Minister and his Department of Agriculture, and of course credit the good people at the Nevis Animals Speak who have come forward to try and resolve this particular problem. I want to continue to give the commitment of this government that we will work collaboratively with various groups. Our focus is to do what is best for the island of Nevis. But however, we will not be browbeated, we will not be blackmailed. If the people who are here who are desirous of working with us collaboratively in a partnership, a genuine partnership for the advancement of the people of Nevis, then we are available to do that. But do not send me any petition. Do not go out there and try to get people to blackball Nevis and to say bad things about Nevis on false information. That is not the way, in my respectful view, that we get things done. So I want to commend the people at Nevis Animals Speak, and commend agriculture under the leadership of the Deputy Premier for the excellent work and partnership that we've engaged in to make this possible. We now need to follow up. I also want to make it clear that this is not in substitution for, but in addition to our own efforts through our veterinary clinic, using, of course, our local vets who themselves have the necessary expertise to assist. But as we understand, they clearly, through their work for agriculture, have been very involved with goats and sheep and cattle and the like, and taking care of those animals for the farmers. And so the question is now, what about the dogs, many of whom have been roaming wild and reproducing at an alarming rate? So we are trying to tackle that problem, and I'm very happy, as I said, for this particular partnership. In terms of further updates, Culturama, the Minister of Culture, is here. Culturama has been launched with a bang, I'm told. The media launch was on Friday, April 20th, and that, I'm told, is very successful. You're now hearing more about Culturama as we ramp up in terms of the promotions for our summer festival. I am hopeful that you would visit the Culturama site on Facebook, that you would visit the website for Culturama, and that the people get involved. Culturama is, for us, the zenith. It's the culmination of our cultural activities for the year. It's the one time of year when all of our people come together. Whether you're a Calypsonian, whether you're a contestant in one of the pageants, we are inviting people to get involved. I'm told that there might be still some space for young ladies who are interested in the Queen shows. We're inviting you to get involved. This is our thing. It is how we seek to preserve our cultural heritage. And we want our people to get involved. Because, you know, sometimes you hear our people say, oh, culture wasn't sweet. But you ask them, what did you do? And they say, well, I was watching on TV. Or I was on the side of the road in town watching. So, you know, get in a band. Do like the Deputy Premier. You know, he liked to be in a band. And Madam Minister Hazel Brandy, I think she was queen of the band. So you need to lead by example. You know, I'm not so good in that. So I cheer and encourage everyone to get involved. So Culturama is our thing, and I really would like our people to come out in their numbers and get involved. I think we have a very exciting calendar of events. Matter of fact, I think we had a problem this year in terms of trying to decide what events we're going to accommodate because they have been so many. In terms of other projects that we hope that I want to give a quick report on, the CCTV contracts, CCTV room, that is the command center for the CCTV, I'm told the contracts have been determined through the Ministry of Public Works, and those who have been successful through a bidding process are being advised. Those who are unsuccessful, have been unsuccessful, are also being advised, and that we expect construction to start there around the 9th of May. On that, that is a critical piece of our law enforcement and security architecture. Because as we all know, throughout St. Kitts and Nevis, we're putting in place now a CCTV, nationwide CCTV system. And for Nevis, the issue was to have that system available and to have the command center set up. So we are now hoping that from the 9th of May. So we are asking for the cooperation of the police and those at Nevlec, who I'm told might be inconvenienced because the construction is taking place in that general vicinity. But we hope to proceed with that very quickly to get that done. Brownhill Road, I want to commend Minister Brand, Minister with responsibility for public works and infrastructure, because we have worked very hard and we were able to convene a town hall meeting there last Monday evening, where we were able to have a discussion with the people of Brownhill to mark the start of the Brownhill Road and to indicate to them what they can expect. I was very impressed with the work, the modeling that was done by Public Works. They even produced a video showing the road and how it's going to look. And what I can say, if the final product is half as good as that video, I believe the people of Brown will have a first-class highway when they're done. So, again, we're quite happy that that project is starting. And we've heard the complaints, because a lot of people have said, well, you know, things appear a little slow. We are rolling out our program. We're rolling out our program. This today is the 30th of April. Tomorrow, of course, we're going to May. And I just want the public to understand that we're not deaf. We're hearing, we're listening, but that things have to be rolled out in an orderly way. And so now we hope to have hospital going, Brownhill Road going in terms of major infrastructure, CCTV room going, all relatively around the same time. And so I hope that perhaps the criticism that we'll get, as we got at some point in the past, was that maybe we're doing too much. But things are starting to happen, and I'm very happy for that. Of course, we have the police station at Newcastle that is also ongoing, and we anticipate in short order to have the long-awaited pier at Wally again. So that's another public sector direct investment that this government has been making. I wanted to just give a brief update now as I close on the issue for SEDU. SEDU, Small Enterprise Development Unit, they have moved and they are now going to be housed at the old credit union building. is what I've been advised, and that we are seeking to expand what we're doing there at CIDU. We have made a commitment to the development of small businesses. We have relocated that office, and we want to create a business development center. The aim is to provide the opportunity to move business ideas from conception to implementation within the shortest possible of time. The focus will be on creativity and innovation, as we wish our young entrepreneurs to move away from the buying and selling trade and start to be creative in developing business ventures. Maybe I should say to move away from the traditional buying and selling trade, because whatever business you're in the buying and selling business. So we want them to move away, where, for example, they think that, go and buy clothes in Miami and come back and sell. Nothing is wrong with that. But we want people now to start to expand the range of offerings, and so we're looking to do that. The motto of this revised entity, CEDU, the Small Enterprise Development Unit and the Business Development Center that we're putting together, is Invest Nevis, building our economy one business at a time. And we want there to offer an array of services. For example, we want to assist prospective business persons with the writing of their business plans and proposals for funding, provide business counseling for young entrepreneurs, identify and apply for grant funding for agencies such as AICA, JEF, CDB, and others on behalf of those entities in the relevant sectors. So the idea is to create a one-stop shop in a way. A lot of people have an idea in their head, they don't have any money, and they don't know how to formulate a plan. So the idea is that you can go there and get assistance. As a young entrepreneur, young business person, you have the idea in your head, you want to flesh it out, you want to get a proposal so you could get some financing, that we will provide some assistance to you. We have on 19th April hosted an intellectual property rights workshop that was well attended, and we were very pleased there to offer that to some of our musicians and other artists, because we want them to see themselves as business persons and to register their brand and copyright their materials in their possession. So that's very important. For 2018, the thrust will be on business development, particularly in the agricultural sector and the use of agricultural products. And so during the period May 8th to 22nd, CIDU, in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, will be hosting a 2-week workshop where they will be looking at manufacturing essential oil using agricultural materials such as peppermint bush, lemongrass, etc. The facilitator will be a Mr. Timothy Prescott from Barbados. There will be an exhibition of these products at the end of the workshop, to which all hoteliers will be invited. So see what we're trying to do. Get the expertise in, try to pass on the skill set. How do you create, your fancy oils for your massages, etc., from local materials that we have here, local peppermint bush, lemongrass, and other such things that grow here. And then invite the hoteliers in. We feel that, for example, the hotels might be interested in using products that are sourced locally, that are manufactured locally. It might actually be even cheaper for them. And we would look forward to the day when at the Spa at Four Seasons, for example, they're offering massages with locally produced oils. So this is the type of thing that we're trying to do, and of course encouraging the public to engage. I've mentioned the fact that we have the Information Technology Week from April 29th to May 5th. And again, the ICT, and that the thrust there, ICT, the thrust towards the 21st century economy. That is what they are, will have their week under that banner. On Thursday, May 3rd, the IT department has organized a workshop at NEPAC focusing on the concept of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. It's a fairly new concept for our region, but is well advanced in other parts of the world. It's a concept that the NI is embracing, as we feel, if properly developed, it can be an added product for our financial services sector. The facilitator will be Jeremy Stevens of Barbados, who I think is an accepted regional authority on cryptocurrency. Just so the public again is aware, this is an area that we've been looking at quite closely. It's an area that we're very interested in pursuing, and we have a very small team already assembled within the NIA who's looking at this whole issue of cryptocurrency and what we can do here on the island of Nevis to make that a part of what we are offering in terms of our financial services coverage and our financial services offerings to the general public. Now, I will leave that there because I've been going on for a little while. I've tried to give a snapshot for various areas and to basically just touch on some of the work that is already happening since I was last here, or to update on work that is ongoing. And I believe now it is almost 10:30, so I will ask if there are any questions for me and take those questions now. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Premier, government officials, officers, media, and residents and friends of St. Kitts and Nevis. My name is Dion Handy, and I am here representing Nevis Pages. Mr. Premier,
Yes.
I was here last week, and I was quite surprised that a number of people met me on the road and said, your questions are easy. My questions are too easy. I don't know if these questions are hard, but these questions have been gathering some traffic on social media, the radio, and in the various communities. First question. Mr. Premier, we had Parliament about a week ago, and you had the first reading of the Freedom of Information Act. Can you confirm when the full implementation of this act will be done? Also, last month, I asked a question in regards to integrity in public life, and you said it will be implemented way before June. This is almost May. Can you confirm the first reading? Will it be in sometime in May? And let's see here. Mr. Premier, there was a recent report from the United States human rights agents. They were in St. Kitts doing some surveys down there, and their findings were that we have in St. Kitts and Nevis lack of financial transparency in particularly the Citizen by Investment Fund. Can you confirm how many passports has been sold since 2015? And they also found that there is a block on opposition parties and the media as well to exercise their freedom of peaceful assembly and expression. And we've seen this with the recent social media policy. Can you comment on that as well? And also, Mr. Premier, can you give us an update on the monkey feeding program that was implemented some months ago? Because from the sound of it on radio and in the various communities, people are still complaining that the monkeys are damaging the farms. So basically, they're complaining that the monkeys are eating twice. The government is feeding the monkeys and they're still coming down at the farms and damaging crops and produce. So can you, Mr. Premier, whose idea was it to feed those monkeys? Let me see. Oh, Mr. Premier, I have a lot of questions here, but they're all over the place, so that's why I'm a little bit shaky.
You could come back, you know. You don't need to ask them all at once.
Yes.
But go ahead. You have another one?
All right. Mr. Premier, I commend you with your representation abroad in Windrush, representing Windrush generation. I think you did a very good job. But my question is, who is representing the generations of people here in St. Kitts and Nevis, in particularly young people, with the increase in cost of living? You mentioned there's a drop in jobs as a result of the construction drop. We know construction is not sustainable. So when will we have some sustainable jobs in Nevis to create some jobs for our people? And can you give us a little idea of the government's plan on growth and to revitalize peace, progress, and prosperity in St. Kitts and Nevis, in particularly Nevis? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Your question is almost as long as my introductory statement, so I will have to try to do the best that I can. Let me start at the top. You say in Parliament we had the first reading of the Freedom of Information Ordinance, and you asked about implementation. The first reading, clearly, by just your understanding of parliamentary procedure, would tell you that the first reading is just that. It's a first reading. We then have asked that that legislation be sent out to the media, to members of the Bar Association, etc., and that it get the widest possible dissemination so that we can have feedback. The idea behind the Freedom of Information legislation is to allow individuals, including the media, to be able to have access to government information, to formally request and have a process where you can get government information. So it's no longer the way more fancy of a minister or a head of a department. There is going to be somebody called an information officer in each of the ministries who would have that responsibility. So it creates a structure, a framework for us to engage in a more open and transparent way. I believe that even the harshest critics of this government and this party in government would admit that we have always championed the idea of greater transparency in government and greater accountability. And this is one of the areas that we're working on. So we do not yet have an implementation, because before we get to implementation, we have to go to a second reading, pass the legislation, put in place the necessary infrastructure to make the legislation work. But we anticipate that that ought to be in place this year. In relation to integrity in public life, you say something about a first reading. I just want to make it clear that the integrity in public life legislation has already been passed and brought into law. So there's no question of any first reading. The legislation was passed and brought into law since 2013. What we are seeking to do now is operationalize the legislation. So we are and the last time, I think, when we spoke here, I said that one of the steps that had to be taken to operationalize was to appoint the Integrity Commission. Integrity Commission will comprise 3 individuals, a chair, who has to be a retired judge or a lawyer of 15 years standing or over. And that chair is appointed by the Deputy Governor General in her own deliberate judgment. And then 2 members, one appointed on the advice of the leader of the opposition, the other appointed on the advice of the Premier. We have already submitted our nominee to the Deputy Governor General, and it will be now for the opposition to submit their nominee, and for the Deputy Governor General in our own deliberate judgment to appoint a chair. Once that is done, we then have a question of the budget for the Integrity Commission. But again, I anticipate that we should have this in place quite soon. I know that in St. Kitts, where we're working in tandem with St. Kitts, that they too will have that in place quite soon. So both islands are proceeding along the same path in relation to both freedom of information and integrity in public life. As a matter of fact, I think the freedom of information federal legislation goes to Parliament this week in St. Kitts. So they will be ahead of Nevis in that regard. But we have to ensure that both bits of legislation mirror each other and ensure that we're moving in the same direction. The recent report that you spoke about in terms of the U.S. and human rights, they said there's no financial transparency. I'm not quite sure how to respond, because in my own experience, the U.S. will write what it wants to write, regardless of what the evidence says. For example, I saw a recent report to say that there's been an explosion of financial banking, explosive growth in the offshore banking sector in Nevis. Now, if you can find the growth as a member of the media, please, I would like to see it, because it means that the government is not getting the revenue from that growth. So they say these things, and it's not always because the U.S. says so, makes it so. This government at the federal level has been the only government to come out and give statements in relation to passports and monies that have been earned from this sector. I think that is suggested in the budget documents that are always produced each year. You've asked me a specific question as to the number of passports since 2015. I regret I don't have that information to hand. That will be a matter for the Honourable Prime Minister, whose office deals with that specific question. As you know, the the Premier of Nevis and the Nevis administration really has no jurisdiction in relation to the Citizenship by Investment program in terms of how it's administered. That's administered from St. Kitts. You say that there's a block on opposition parties and the media. Again, I don't know where that block is. You're here. I don't know whether you're a member of the media. I don't think you're a member of the opposition, but you're a member of the media. And you're here and you're asking questions. This whole purpose behind this monthly press conference, which is something new that we're doing in Nevis, is to give people an opportunity to engage directly, as we are doing now. The media, I always see the media as a critical part of what we do, Mr. Handley, in terms of keeping government honest, keeping government forthright. I have said publicly that the media is, in my view, just as important as the independent courts, as the honest politicians. All of us need to do our part to make the system the best that it can be, and the media has a role to play. And that is why I have instituted this, and this government has instituted this, that we come here and we face the media. And all of our ministers, I think, are available in various public forums. We have an event, I believe, on Thursday nights with Keith Scarborough on Vaughan Radio, where we report. We have my own show, which has been going for 12 years now, On the Mark. I think I'm the only leader of any government anywhere which has a regular show that comes on and takes questions and the like. So we are open and accessible. We may not always get the answers you want, but certainly we are available to answer questions. And so I don't know, again, this block on opposition parties or the media. You spoke about the social media policy as an example, and I don't see how that's an example. Because I'm pretty certain where you work, Mr. Handley, you can't spend your time doing unproductive things on social media when your employer has work for you to do. And what it seems has happened in our country is that everybody expects the government to have a lower standard than the private sector. I don't know why. Everybody feels that when you work for government, you come late, you do as little work as possible, you spend your time ordering the latest fashion and sneakers and shoes on social media. And then if anybody dares to say something to you, oh, you are negatively impacting my freedoms. How is it you can't do it at Four Seasons or TDC? How is it that a worker at TDC cannot go on social media and cuss TDC and say TDC is the worst company in the world? But that same worker in government can cuss their minister and say he's incompetent. Somehow we seem to feel that because you work for government, you have more freedom and less responsibility than those who are in the private sector. And I'm saying no. People need service. Whether they get it at TDC, Four Seasons, or in the NIA, those of us who work here, from ministers down, have to provide the necessary service to the members of the public. And any member of the public who is not being well served means that we are not doing our job. So the social media policy was not meant to shut up anybody or quiet anybody. It's not meant to do that at all. Who wants to support whomsoever, they do that, and that is a matter for them. In fact, I encourage them to support who they want to support. But at the end of the day, we have to have some accountability. And just 2 days ago, a lady called me to say she works in a particular department in government. She said, what was the starting time for government? I said, my understanding of the starting time is what it was. And she said, well, people, all an hour sometimes after that starting time, nobody show up for work yet. Could they do it in the private sector? I'm sure you would agree with me, Mr. Handley, that they will be fired forthwith. And you would have no problem with that, because you say, listen, people should know what the rules are, but somehow in government. You know, one young person approached me looking for a job in government. I said, but you're working already. I said, yeah, but they're working too hard. And if I just reach 5 minutes late, they want to write me up. So she didn't have to say anything more, because I understood, implicit in what the young person was saying to me, I want to come in government because I don't have to work hard and I can show up anytime I want. We need to stop that. We need to stop it, and all of us should be on the same page. So the social media policy was not designed to stifle any speech, because all it did was pull together what is already existing in terms of our regulations and say to our people, listen, a lot of things that people are doing and getting away with are improper and contrary to. So we said, here's the policy now, one document, so that you have a sense. So I have heard all the talk about dictatorship and trying to prevent people from saying what they have to say and all of that. If you want to say what you want to say and you want to do whatever, that's okay. You can do so, but you don't need to work for government. You can work outside the government and you can criticize and cuss all day. It's a matter for you. But just put yourself in the shoes of a minister. Minister Brand is charged by the cabinet with carrying out a particular policy. He announces his policy. And his permanent secretary goes on Facebook or wherever and says, stupidest policy I've ever heard about. Mr. Brand, I don't know what you're doing. How can Mr. Brand have any confidence, therefore, that the policy will be carried out? Workers down the line. And these are the kind of things. And somehow we feel that because you work for government, that is all right. That is acceptable behavior. It's not. I am saying that every single person in the public service, from minister down to cleaner, or from cleaner up to minister, however you want it, has to exhibit the necessary professionalism. And if they're not prepared to do it, then my view is let them find work elsewhere. It's as simple as that. And I'm not going to resile from that because too many people seem to feel that the government has to be in a constant position of apology and backing away because there are these accusations that somehow we are, by asking people to be professional, saying to people be on time, people up and down abusing government vehicles. And when a government vehicle passes midnight, 10 o'clock, I don't know what job they have that they're doing at 10 o'clock. You and I, Mr. Handy, are paying for the gas. And if they hit a donkey as they go around some corner, you and I have to spend the money to fix that vehicle. So we've said park up the government vehicles. Unless you have some special permission from your head of department. Park up the government vehicles. Some have said, oh, there are people here, I've been told, who go and fill up the tank with gas every Friday afternoon. You know what that is for? You think it's for your work? Or the government work? That's the lineman, the gas for the lineman for the weekend. And you don't want to see no G government vehicle down at the bar Saturday night. Or park outside the church Sunday morning. Or up at Value Mart with the family Sunday afternoon. It's not fair. And a lot of people abusing those vehicles own their own vehicle. They have their vehicle parked up home. But they're taking up the vehicle that is owned by you and I, the general public, and abusing it. And so these things must stop. And I don't want the public to feel that somehow we're doing something wrong. We're saying they must stop. We have to have greater accountability. And when we're talking about freedom of information, integrity in public life, we're saying that we must be more accountable as the politicians. And the public service must be more accountable. That is all that we're saying. So I trust that it's not perceived in that way. The monkeys and who decided to feed them, the experts. I guess they have to be fed. The only issue was whether they feed on people's crops or you try to create some feeding stations. And I just want it to be said because, you know, Mr. Hanley, I hear the questions, but, you know, you come at it from a perspective which is, I think, a little humorous, but not quite factual. It wasn't just feeding monkeys. You mustn't say the monkeys were eating breakfast in the mountain and then lunch down in the farm, right? What it was designed to do was to change the pattern of behavior. And so the idea was that if you push the monkeys back up in the mountains and they could find food up there, then they would be less inclined to come down and raid the farms. And also importantly is that in the food that they were being fed, they were being, what's the word I'm looking for? Sterilized. Contraceptives. Not contraceptives, because I think it's sterilized. So they were being sterilized over time. So they were putting something into the food to sterilize it. So it wasn't just that they're having breakfast and then, as I said, lunch and dinner elsewhere. It was a program that was designed to, over time, degrade the population and at the same time change behavior. The sense was that if they could get their banquet, I think some members of the media call it the monkey banquet. If they could get the monkey banquet up in the mountain, then there would be no need to come down and raid. But remember though, that the monkey project was not just about the feeding stations. It was also, as I said, about the sterilization. It was also about providing the necessary electrified fences around the island. You see it now at the foot of Zion River. You see it over there at Cades Bay. All of those were part of that project. And I think it's a little early to measure the success. I think it's an effort that has to be sustained. The gentleman who was here from South Africa had to return to South Africa. So we're now looking for the Ministry of Agriculture and the department there to continue this effort. And we're talking to see who else we might be able to attract in order to sustain that effort, because we do have a problem with the monkeys and we have to address it. The alternative is to go around on some kind of massive cull of the monkeys, and we understand where that will lead. because the same people who are saying that something should be done will be the same ones who take to the media. And all of us were bombarded, I believe, when we had a cull of donkeys sometime last year. And we recognize well what happened here, where locals engaged in some quarters those from overseas and tried to create, again, this blackmail situation where Nevis was being portrayed in a particular light. So it is an ongoing effort, and that decision to feed them, as you say, was really a decision taken by the experts. Last issue, Windrush. We tried our best on this particular issue. I think the public has been well updated on it. These were people who went to England, starting in 1948 and going up to about 1973, and were now facing deportation, having lived there all their lives. Caribbean people mostly, who were invited to come to rebuild England after World War II. And we went to bat for them. I have said so publicly, I want to say so again, to commend the leadership of our High Commissioner in London, His Excellency Kevin Isaac, and the High Commissioner of Barbados, also in London, His Excellency Guy Hewitt, because those two led the way in relation to this. So when we went for Shogam, the Caribbean Heads of Government meeting, a delegation led by the Honorable Prime Minister, we met the ground already prepared for us. The batting wicket was very, very good. So you just had to go in and score the runs. So we went and we tried our best to get the word out. And just yesterday we were advised that the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has resigned and is now being replaced. This morning, I'm told, by a man called Javid, I think, Sajid Javid, has replaced him has replaced her as Home Secretary. It tells you that clearly the pressure that was brought to bear was quite immense. It really showed, as the media exposure got greater, the power of the media and the need of the media to be vigilant. But it also was able to show that these were people whose lives had really been destroyed by these policies. So we have been able to get from the British government, one, that the Windrush generation, their children, will now be given citizenship. Two, that they have removed the requirements as to evidence, because that was part of the problem. When you arrived in England at 3 years old in 1950, 1955, on your mother's passport from Jamaica or Trinidad or St. Kitts Nevis, your mom has perhaps long since passed away. You've been living there all your life, went to school there. But many of us are not meticulous at keeping records. So when you went now to get the passport, they tell you had to prove that you've been there all this time. A lot of these people didn't even have a passport before, so it was impossible. What we found out is that the British government had the information all along, because they have the school records, the health records, but they were telling you that you should prove it to them. We also found out that in 2010 they destroyed a lot of landing cards for the Windrush people. So not even that was available. So now they've agreed that they're going to grant these people their citizenship. They've set up a compensation fund. They've set up a special task force within the Home Office to deal with these applications. They've committed to dealing with them within 2 weeks. They've restored the people's rights to health care, because that's a big issue. People who are affected could not get health care, could not get access to their bank accounts, could not get jobs, and certainly could not get housing. And many of them who had traveled abroad, imagine you leave, you go on Jamaica to attend a wedding because you figure you're an Englishman. And then when you come now back, they tell you, no, you can't enter. So a lot of people got stranded overseas who could not get back into the country. So all of those people now can look forward to some compensation to have their rights restored. So I think it was an excellent time, a great victory for diplomacy for the Caribbean. And I did my little part. I think our Prime Minister did his part. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, did his part. But all of us were batting on a wicket that was prepared for us. And I think that we did well in the circumstances. You say who's representing people here? The government. That's why we are here. That's why we were elected. And I believe when we go back to the people will say, well done, thou good and faithful servant, and elect us again. So that's what we are hoping to do. Any other questions?
Good morning. Monique Washington, St. Kitts Nevis Observer newspaper. The last time we were here, you spoke a little bit about the hospital project, and you said one of the setbacks was that they didn't have a project manager. Now, the project is set to begin sometime this week. Has a project manager been appointed or contracted, and who is that person? Now, second question. Last month, we were seeing the early departure of the chairman for NEVLEC. Since, has another chairman been appointed, and if not, how will this affect the running of NEVLEC?
Okay, the project manager question, excellent question. I'm told that we have come to terms with the new project manager, and that person has been identified as Mr. Billy Claxton, whom we hope will take the project forward. In relation to NEVLEC, yes, we had the unfortunate resignation of the previous chair, and we're in the process now of finding a new chair. We have a short list, and I hope that I'll be able to make an announcement very shortly on that. In terms of whether it affects the running of NEVLEC, I don't think so, because we have the rest of the board is in place, and of course the management of NEVLEC remains in place. So I don't anticipate that that is affecting the management day-to-day of NEVLEC at this point. Let us remember that the board doesn't engage in the day-to-day management. That is for the manager of NEVLEC. The board deals, of course, with setting the direction and the overall policy. So I hope that that will be in place very shortly, and once it's done, we'll make an announcement.
Good morning, Premier Brantley. Chairman Abel of SKN Vibes. I have several questions. One, we would have seen over the weekend another juvenile being charged in connection to the robbery of MEMS Pizzeria. What is the short-term plan that the government has basically to deal with or curb the problem involving youths in relation to violence, gun-related problems, robberies, and so forth? Secondly, we've been hearing over the last several weeks the talk of elections, both from your deputy premier and those on syndicates.
You're calling an election?
Is the CCM party prepared for a snap elections? And if that is called, how would that affect policies that your government have basically to implement?
Snap election where? Let me just be clear.
In the Federation. And
federally. Okay.
Federally. Going back to the Windrush issue, what assurances were the government's leaders that were present at the Commonwealth Heads of Government given? Because an article published yesterday indicated that more persons were still being held in connection to facing deportation because their issues, or they were being held for several months. These are cases dating back before the Commonwealth Heads of Government. So what assurances were the government given in relation to these people not being deported? Is the government funding, or is the government putting monies into the geothermal project? And on the issue of corresponding banking relationships, where's the government, where's St. Kitts and Nevis basically in this regard? Because we've been hearing since 2016 that the government, the central bank, and everybody has been discussing this issue, but it seemed to not be getting anywhere. 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start where you ended, the whole issue of the risking. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis, in my view, has been playing its part, and it's a CARICOM-wide effort, because throughout the CARICOM, institutions have been affected. It's not only, however, a Caribbean phenomenon, because as was pointed out, I said I attended recently a CLAC event in St. Lucia. We have countries elsewhere in the world that have faced similar risks. De-risking really has come about because in 2008 we had the crash, of course, in terms of the banking sector. And regulations were developed to try and prevent that from happening. Our argument has been that nothing that happened in the Caribbean had anything to do with the crash. That crash was about people engaging in exotic instruments, derivatives and credit swaps and mortgages. It was a housing crisis that led to a contagion that impacted some of the big banks. The reaction, however, has been that, of course, we are small and therefore, I think, vulnerable. And so a lot of significant fines have been created under new regulations which say that if these big banks were to run themselves into any difficulty, then significant fines can be applied. A lot of the risking that we're seeing, or the linking that we're seeing from the Caribbean, has nothing really to do with actual examples. It has to do with the perception that the Caribbean is a high-risk area for for things like money laundering and terrorist financing, etc. And the banks don't want to get caught. It has also to do with our size. Because you take a bank like, say, the Bank of Nevis, in terms of what that generates, profit for a big Bank of New York or so, it's immaterial, that's irrelevant. We're dealing here in millions and they're dealing in trillions. So the truth is that I think a lot of it has to do with them just not being interested in continuing a relationship with the small, the minnows. So you're too small, so I can let you go. What we've been trying to get them to appreciate is that in letting go these small banks, in preventing them from engaging in the international financial system, it's creating real havoc for our economies, one. And two, it is having the opposite effect to that which they desire. Because if we are cut off from the global banking system, it means that we are forced to a cash economy. And cash is the hardest thing in the world to trace. It is better, and we have argued that it is better for them, to engage with us to make our banking sector stronger and better regulated than to punish us by cutting us off. Because then, of course, I have 2 children studying abroad, I have to take a suitcase of money up to them. And once you go to a cash economy, the very things that they're claiming they're fighting against, money laundering and terrorist financing, our argument has become a lot easier. So I think that is certainly starting now to reverberate and starting to penetrate their minds. The other thing I would say is that for a long time, when we were pressing the U.S. government, for example, on this, the U.S. government's response was, this has nothing to do with us. This is a private matter between banks. So if a bank in New York say they no longer want to do business with a bank in St. Kitts, that's between them. And so we've taken some time to explain to the U.S. government it's a result of their regulations and the response to their regulations that is leading to this problem. I'm happy to say now that this occupied time at the Commonwealth Heads meeting. It occupied time there at the ECLAC meeting in St. Lucia. The spokesperson on this has been PM Gaston Brown in Antigua, who I think has done an excellent job. And I believe that we are finally getting a little bit of traction, because certainly in the last year or so we have not had any banks lose their correspondent banking relationship. That is the advice that I have, that in the last year we have not had any losses within the region. But it is something that we can't let up on. It's something that we have to keep pursuing. You talk about a juvenile being charged for the very unfortunate situation at Mem's Pizzeria. I know Mem's very well. She's like a family member to me, and I was very disheartened when I heard that people had gone in there to try and rob her. What I would say is what I keep saying, that we have in our society, it appears, some people who feel that they must do what they want, they must get what they want. They don't care who it costs, and they will sit down all day and watch you go to work, get up early, go to work hard, and then they think that their role is to come and take from you that which you've worked for. I continue to encourage our people to do what is right, because I continue to say I don't want anybody to call me when their children get themselves into problems. Doing what is right start at home. And if a 17-year-old is taking up a firearm to go and rob, you have to wonder what is happening with that 17-year-old at home. And we have to start to talk openly and frankly about these things. Because everybody seems to feel it's a government problem. I don't know who this 17-year-old is. I know he's not one of my children. So, everybody say, Premier, it's your problem. So government, ministers, it's your problem. So how about their parents? How about the communities? You think that some of these homes, the parents and the family members don't know that these youngsters have firearms in the home? Of course. When they go out and rob and they come home with $2,000 and they not walk nowhere. You take the money and you go shopping at Rams? Or you ask them where you get this from? When they come home with cell phone and fancy gadgets, cost thousands of dollars, and they're not working anywhere, are the parents doing what they're supposed to be doing? And when it happens, everybody say the government must respond. Well, I think the government responded because, as you said, somebody was charged. And I'm very happy that the police were able to respond quickly. I'm told that members in the community were part of that assistance. I'm very, very proud of that. And it takes me to the next bit of what I want to say, because There has to be a role for the community. It can't be just the police and the government, because police officers are humans too. They have their families too. They have to rest too. They get sick too. So if the policeman or woman doesn't happen to be on the scene, well, you who are on the scene must say something. But you want to tell the policeman he must come solve the problem when you know and have the solution and you're not prepared to help? So we must start to say these things openly and publicly and say to our people that this notion of seeing and not saying, because not me. Hear somebody say, "Me never got caught yet, me never got caught." Well, if you're not going to court and you get robbed, well, don't complain. Don't complain if your neighbor gets robbed. Don't call me and cuss me, or call the police and cuss the police, because you're part of the problem. And we must be open and honest about these things. You're part of the problem. So what is our plan? Our plan is to invest in things like CCTV. Just yesterday, the day before, I think, they had the inauguration of the new forensic lab in St. Kitts, which is going to assist immensely in moving us now to a greater use of technology to solve crimes. Our police have been exposed to a lot of training in forensics and the like, crime scene investigation. All of these we have done. We have brought in trainers from overseas. We have from time to time buttressed the local police with people from this agency in Barbados. What do they call now? RSS. So we have continued to act. If you're going to St. Kitts now all day long, forget, but you see the cameras are up. That will happen the same in Nevis. All along the island main road we'll have cameras up. But at the end of the day, and let me add that we've invested here in Nevis. We are this administration has committed to, and we are hiring a young lawyer to assist the police with prosecutions as well, under the direction of the DPP. So just that people are clear, the Director of Public Prosecution will have control over this young lad. But we are paying. We are the ones investing in Nevis. And Nevis continues to invest. Let me remind the public, that there's no line item in the Constitution for Nevis in terms of security. Security is a federal matter. The country only has one Minister of National Security, and nobody in Nevis has that title. That is the way it has always been. But notwithstanding that, at every step of the way, a police station is being built right now in Newcastle. I asked the Deputy Premier who had to go and borrow money to have it happen. The NIA. A police station was built up there in Gingerland. NIA. Barracks built up here in Bath. NIA. Vehicles for the police. NIA. CCTV room being built. NIA. So I say that to say that even though it is not our responsibility, we have shouldered some of the burden and continue to shoulder some of the burden, spending your taxpayer money to try our best to respond to crime and criminality. But the government cannot do it alone. The police cannot do it alone. And the public has to do its part. When people now tell me they're fed up with crime, I say, I'm fed up too. What are you doing to help with the situation? We have to do our part. I yesterday attended a church service in church ground. And it's a church there, I can't recall the name, but it's led by a very famous named individual, because he's Linden Providence. His name, he have names of two significant areas in Ghana, so he looked like he owned both. But he had some visiting pastors there. And I thought that the approach it took was, my only regret was that NTV them wasn't there to broadcast this widely. And the man said that they were immigrants from Ghana. They now live in the United States, and they were able to progress. And he said the problem that a lot of our people have, particularly a young person, because if you're at 17 and your thing is to take up a gun and rob somebody, it tells me you're suffering from that problem. He said if you don't have a job, plant a little piece of land and grow something to sell. Right? He said if you have a job, you start small, you take your little steps. And one at a time you build yourself. He said the problem is that a lot of people are sitting here and they want to jump from here and jump to the top without putting in the work to get there. And that is perhaps a human condition, but we have to encourage our people to say, listen, you sit on the block and you watch a man drive by in a fancy car, you watch a man in a shirt and tie going to his office. You don't know what he would have done. The level of sacrifice and effort that he or she would have put in to get to where they are. And too many of our people want it, but they want it now. They don't want to work for it. They want it now. Other people are building something. Every month I get my pay, I put away $1,000. I put away $2,000 because I want to pay down to buy this car. I want to pay down to buy this house. And we have to encourage our people again and understand things are incremental. That's how you grow. Not you want, I see some of the youngsters, the phones they have. My phone fell the other day and the screen cracked. Is the phone still working? So I take it out at some function I went the other day and a young person said to me, a big man like you with a phone like that? I said, but the phone working. Right? What is inherent in his comment is that he would never be seen with that. Right? But I'm saying these are lessons we have to start to again tell our people. When I was a little boy, your mother tell you, hungry as we were, no trouble what people have. Walk straight, come straight. Right? I hear people now saying, oh, crime is a result of no jobs. Crime is a result of poverty. Who was poorer than us in Nevis? And we never kill nobody. We never kill anybody. You go, you find mango, you find guinea, you find whatever you could find. Right? But you never thought, it never occurred to you to engage in that kind of criminal activity. So now people say, oh, people poor, that's why they might kill people. Really? So we need to have that conversation, but don't have it in a way that, politicians like to talk and nice and try and tell you and daps you up and thing and tell you, I know you killed somebody last time, but vote for me. No. You must start to tell them that you're not acceptable in our society. That what you're doing is devaluing our society and derailing all the efforts. Here we talk about tourism, we're talking about all these things, wonderful things happening in the country, can be gone in the blink of an eye if we don't control crime and criminality. So I'm very happy. I commend the police for their quick action. I commend members in the community who helped them. And I hope that this is a warning to others out there that the police are out, they're vigilant, and they will deal with you accordingly. Go and try and find work. I just say 4 seasons, 40 to 70, you could be in that number. Spring Air, Geothermal, CCTV room, Brown Hill Road, you could put yourself in that number. Go and find work and work for what you want instead of trying to rob people and take advantage of people. Snap elections, I don't know where your intel is coming from. I have not heard anything about a snap election. Certainly we had one here just a few months ago in Nevis. I don't expect to have one happening in Nevis for a little while. I didn't think I think we have until 2020. And I have not been privy to any discussion suggesting that an election will come. If an election come, however, you ought to know that the CCM is the best team in the country and that we are always ready. So I just want to make that very clear and put a punctuation mark that we are always ready and our team is battle tested. We have just been tested a few months ago, and I do not believe. We normally put the big blue machine in the shop for some repairs, but this time around we didn't have put it in the shop. It's really now primed and ready to go. So at the moment's notice we can go. All right? I don't think that there's anything. Funding for geothermal, no, we're not providing any funding. The NIA, I do know that the developers were able to secure some funding from the SIDF to help with the drilling, but the majority of that funding is expected to come from overseas. I think that's it. Any other questions?
Windrush, any assurances?
Oh, I'm sorry. Assurances on Windrush. Well, the assurances we have had have been public statements given by the British Prime Minister, by Amber Rudd, the former Foreign Home Secretary. Those were given in Parliament. We had a formal apology being given in Parliament by both, and we had an apology at number 10 Downing Street when the Prime Ministers met with Prime Minister May. She issued an apology there as well. We have the compensation fund that was set up. We have the waiver of the fees to apply for the Windrush generation. And we had a commitment at the time. They said they didn't know how many people might be in custody, but we had a commitment that those people would be released. What I think, however, we have to be careful of, and you members of the media would know this better than me, that others don't try to latch on to Windrush. because Windrush is a special, defined group of people who would have come to the UK in certain circumstances. My own father went in 1955, and I'm sure all of us here would have had families who might have gone in that era. You have a different set of people now who might be there illegally because they're illegal immigrants. This issue is not for them. And so you find that you may have a lot of people start to say, well, listen, my great-great-grandpa was part of Windrush and I should be involved in that. We have to be very careful. And one of the arguments that I have used is that we don't muddy the waters, because that might affect the ability of people who genuinely are from the Windrush generation from getting the rapidity of relief that they need. So we have to be very careful that some now, I see people distributing all kinds of things saying that they're being unfairly treated and everybody's now latching on to Windrush. In my own public comments on the matter, I've been very careful to say that we ought not to confuse the overall issue of immigration and the Windrush issue. In my humble opinion, the Windrush generation were not immigrants, because when they came from British colonies. They came as part of the so-called British Empire. They came as British subjects. So when some 550,000, and this is important for our history, 550,000 people left the Caribbean and went to England after World War II. At the time, that represented 15% of the Caribbean's population. And we went there when all of us were still British colonies. So if you were from Jamaica, you were from Anguilla, you were from St. Stephen's, you were going home. You were going to England because it was old Mother England. It is only after when countries started in 1962, Jamaica started to become independent, that to my mind thereafter you could say, well, you are now an immigrant. But hitherto you were not an immigrant. If I move from Sandy Point to Butlers, I can't be an immigrant. So I think that we have to be careful that we don't conflate, because in conflating the issues, we might create difficulty for people who are genuinely affected. Any other questions?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Brantley. We just have a few questions. Mr. Brown from Vaughan Radio. First is, what is the status of the Bath Hotel? That's question number one. Regarding the social security, how long will the NIA, or even more so the federal government, receive funds to build homes for our residents here on St. Kitts and Nevis? And the other question, could you name the psychiatrist, as you mentioned in your statements earlier, in the Environmental Health Office? Would the NIA explore the possibility of cryptocurrency transactions as it relates to the offshore industry and other services, etc.? And finally, what does the NIA have in place or plan to put in place for prisoners while they're in jail or out of jail? Because why I ask that is this, that we made to understand that prisoners can attain subjects while in prison. However, on the other hand, you find that when they get out, whether they have served their maximum time, they are, so to speak, stigmatized in society. So we just want to know, what does the NIA have in place to, let's say, mitigate or to help towards that? That's it, sir. Okay.
Thank you very much. Let me start where you left off in terms of the prison system. Again, that's a federal system, not for the NIA. But I am aware that, as you say, various rehabilitative efforts have been made in terms of the prisons, trying to pass on skills, subjects, and the like. I am very proud of the record of the NIA, however, because I'm aware that there are people working within the public service in Nevis who would have had criminal records. And part of our own effort has been to seek to employ where possible, so that that stigma that you talk about can be avoided. Stigma, however, is a societal stigma, and so it must be wider than just the NIA. We have to also have the various companies, the Four Seasons and the TDCs and the hospitals, also being willing to employ individuals who would have done their time, paid their price for whatever wrong that might have been committed. A lot of people might have been incarcerated for a number of reasons. Possession of small quantities of marijuana, for example. So one of the things we have been looking at the federal level is to deal with people's records. A lot of times if you're applying for a job, or even if you're going for a U.S. visa, they want to know whether you have a criminal record. So we're moving to a stage now where I think that you'll have records being expunged if the matters were minor matters, and so that people would not have that on their record. So different efforts are being undertaken, but as I said, in large measure, those are federal in nature. The Bath Hotel, it's there. It's being used right now just as a sort of historic site for people to visit. We would be pleased to find a partner who can help us to develop it into a proper museum, or even restore it to some semblance of its former glory. I believe that those who have been following the effort on the UNESCO effort to have Charlestown inscribed as a World Heritage City, that report has come back. It has not been very positive for Charlestown, because the view was that we have destroyed a lot of what perhaps we thought we had, but they did identify the Bath Hotel, indicating that that was an area that they thought. So just as St. Kitts has Brimstone Hill, that we could have the Bath Hotel and Bath Stream being a World Heritage Site. So we're now looking and seeing what we can do in that regard. Crypto, yes, I've indicated that we want to look at that. We want to see what we can do in relation to the development of cryptocurrency, and that is why we've a small task force here within the NIA who are seeking to address that. Social Security and Housing, the Minister of Housing of Land and Housing is here. We have borrowed, I think, $10 million. I think we've reported time and time again as to what we've done with that. We're in the process now, I believe, of engaging with Social Security to get some additional funding, because we have a large demand for housing, particularly among our young people, and we're trying to honor that demand. These proceeds, just so you know, and people can feel assured, it's a loan arrangement. It's being dealt with through the banking system. I believe the credit union is the disbursement of these loans, and the payments are being made in such a way as to ensure the viability. So in a way, it's an investment by Social Security in housing. It is not just, if you will, a giveaway. I think have I covered all your questions? Psychiatrist, the name?
Sheldon Noble.
From where?
He is originally from Canada, studied at MUA.
So Dr. Sheldon Noble, who's Canadian but would have studied at MUA. Any other questions?
I have 3 short ones. Mr. Premier, you mentioned that 999 immigrants were regularized. People within Nevis are wondering, did the government check the criminal record of these immigrants, number one, and number two, will they be able to vote in the next election? And the social media policy, who would be monitoring this policy? Would the government employ some agents to monitor the online social media policy? And when will you give a statement on the 6 months residency requirement for the next election? Because we are aware that the government have a large amount of overseas voters. So will the government be giving a statement to those people living abroad? Thank you.
The issue of work permits, Mr. Hanley, we always check criminal records, because that's a standard requirement for work permits. And so I can assure you that that is done. The issue of whether or not they can vote, you ought to know that work permit and voting has nothing to do with each other. A work permit is the right to work. To be able to vote, you have to satisfy the rights, the criteria for voting. So take, for example, somebody who's from the Dominican Republic. That person who's here may require a work permit, but that person cannot vote in an election here unless they are a citizen, because they're not a Commonwealth national. Somebody who's from Jamaica, on the other hand, may require a work permit, and even without a work permit, could be eligible to vote if they've been living here for a year, because they're Commonwealth national. So we have to be careful not to conflate the two, because the two are not necessarily connected. Whether or not they will be able to vote, short answer is I don't know, because I don't know which among them are registered voters. That is not a requirement or a question that is asked by the work permit office. And having a work permit is not a requirement that is asked by the voter registration at the electoral office in order for you to be eligible to be registered to vote. What you need to have is proof that you've been resident here for a year prior to your registration, or, of course, your proof that you're a citizen, that you can vote. In relation to social media policy and hiring someone, I don't think there's a need to do that. Our view is that having now taken the various legal provisions that currently exist and encapsulated them into a single document, having distributed that, we expect our public servants will conduct themselves accordingly. Human resources will, as always, have oversight over the public service. So if there are infractions, I would expect that human resources will address those. And the permanent secretary for human resources is here with us today, the new permanent secretary, Mr. Elliott. Overseas voters, and a comment from us. Legislation has been proposed, going back to what I said earlier about a first reading, that's all. That's had a first reading. I expect that we're going to have a robust discussion at home and abroad about this, because, of course, we've had a phenomenon of overseas voters for a very long time. However, Mr. Hanley, I would tell you that it is perhaps a misconception of many that somehow this party that I lead is somehow dependent on the overseas vote. Because in all my life in politics, I never chartered no jet yet. And I see plenty jets chartered bringing in people, and it wasn't for us. We'd have bring them 1-1 and try to get some of ours on the other guy's charter. But we never charter a jet. We don't have them kind of money. So whoever accustomed to charter jet and bring them in by the 300s and 400s, they ought to be the ones, I believe, who are more concerned. What I think the discussion ought to be about is people overseas who continue to invest and be a part of our community here. And I'll tell you candidly, we went to England, and in England we had a town hall. The Prime Minister had a town hall, which I attended in Slough. And I was shocked when I walked into the room. We had well over 200 people in that room. And we had to run, literally, because the hall, we only had the hall rented until I think 6 p.m. And all minutes to 7, people still 10, 15 hands up have questions. They know more about what's going on in St. Kitts Nevis than many of us who are here. They listen to all the news. They keep tabs. And so that constituency, if you will, who are living abroad but are invested, heart, mind, and soul, and sometimes their money, in St. Kitts and Nevis, I think a conversation has to happen with them as well. So my own view to the federal government, to the cabinet, is one that I have no difficulty expressing here, is that all of our people should be consulted and decisions arrived at in the best interest of the country. But we ought not to take decisions on the basis that, oh, this is going to hurt one party and help the other. We ought to take decisions that, in my view, ultimately help the process and the transparency of the electoral system. And maybe in that discussion, other proposals and solutions may come forward. In other countries, for example, they have an absentee ballot. Is that an option? I don't know. Some places you can go to the embassies and missions abroad and vote there. Is that an option? I don't know. But I'm saying all of these things should be on the table and we have a discussion accordingly. But again, do not delude ourselves into thinking that somehow one side is dependent on the overseas vote. I think many mistakes have been made in the past. This will be another one if it's followed to its logical conclusion. Any other questions?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Premier.
Yes.
Question 1. Sometime last week, I heard Mrs. Brantley Williams talking about the bullying in schools. What do you think about it? And number 2, what do you think about the child sexual abuse in Nevis? And number 3, what do you think about the crime situation in Nevis when you want to break down the crime situation in Nevis? Thank you.
Okay, I think you've raised 3: bullying in schools, child sexual abuse, and crime. And all 3 are social problems and difficult problems. I'm happy you say that you've heard Madam Minister talking about it. And I think that the Junior Minister for Education, Mr. Liebert, couldn't be here today. But I believe that we had a recent incident at the school which sort of highlighted not just bullying but violence in the school generally. And we have sought to deal with that through counseling. The police have been involved, I'm aware. But the government has been able to provide support and again, we go back to what I keep saying, and I know I sound like a stock record, that we encourage people to do the right thing. Parents must get involved with their children's lives. Children must be held to account and put in certain, have disciplinary guidelines and boundaries, as all of us growing up did. So one of the things that has always puzzled me is how come when we were growing up we had all these boundaries and now we don't have any for our children. So we have to recognize that these are, as I like to call them, social problems, and the entire society needs to be engaged. If there's bullying and violence and fighting at the school, it's not just a job for the principal and the teachers. It's also a job for the parents, for the police, for the government, for the church, for various organizations and various groups to get involved, because the question is, why are children engaging in this behavior? Is it that they're acting out something that's going on at home or that they're seeing in the community? You know, children, they like to say the best teacher for children is seeing, so they do what they see. They act out. A lot of children who are violent are because they have violence in the home or they have violence in the community generally. They see it around them. So all of these, I think, are efforts. In bullying in schools, I think that we are trying to engage more counselors. We have now a very robust counseling system within the Ministry of Health and within the Ministry of Education that we're using. Child sexual abuse, similarly. And the police would have to do more in that regard, because one of the comments I made recently someplace else is that we introduced a system some time ago where teen mothers were allowed to go back to school. And there was a lot of debate about it, but it was introduced without much consultation because it was thought that it was the modern and correct thing to do, so as not to deprive them of an education. I was surprised looking at a particular graduating class recently, and somebody was there pointing out to me all of these young ladies in the graduating class who had sometimes not one but two children. And my view is, if the law says that a young person has to be 16 years old to consent to sexual activity, and a 13-year-old or 14-year-old shows up pregnant, somebody must go to jail for that, because they didn't make themselves pregnant. And that is something in our society we need to confront, because a lot of people are not going to jail for it. And so they get them pregnant at 14, they come back and they do it again at 15 and a half. Right? So I am saying that the overall society needs to have these types of conversations, and we need to be very direct and very blunt with each other. 14-year-old child in school gets pregnant, somebody must go to jail. Simple. And I'm a man and I'm saying so, because I, for myself, can't appreciate what the attraction is to a 13 and 12 and 14-year-old. You know, those are children. We should be trying to protect them. So I am saying that when these things happen, the police, I think, have to do more, but also the families affected have to do more in terms of engaging with the police, because I recognize that sometimes the police say, people, you know, we have a phenomenon here, they say they make up the case. Make up the case. And all that means is that some money is paid for the problem to go away. And we need to get serious with these things. And I think that if we get serious, then people recognize that there are consequences to their actions, then hopefully that will help to curb some of those actions. So crime, similarly, I think I've made the comments before in terms of the investments that we continue to make. But these are things that are in people's hearts and in their minds. And we have to try and reach people through the various groups, community groups, through the school, through the church, through the government, yes, right? And in our homes. All of us have to play our part in trying to redress these problems. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've been going at this now for about 2 hours. I would want to thank all of you who came and were part of this. I think it's a good exercise. It's an exercise where we are allowed to have a conversation with each other about what the NIA is doing, and I thank all of you. I certainly thank my colleague ministers and prominent secretaries who are here. I hope I've done justice, because all of them send me lots of information that they want me to disseminate to your various ministries. But I thank you, because I know everybody's busy, and we try to do this once a month. Thank you to the members of the media for the questions and the really robust way that I feel that questions are being asked. And I look forward to the continued engagement with you, the members of the media, and with the general public. I think it augurs well for all of us, and it helps all of us that we could have this type of forum to exchange information. Thank you.
You are watching NTV Nevis Television.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Government at Work. My name is Keith Scarborough. I will be with you for the next hour and a half to discuss matters of importance as it relates to the smooth running of the CCM-led Nevis Island administration. I remind you, as always, that this program is being brought to you by the CCM-led Nevis Island administration to inform and educate you, the general public, on the developments taking place here on the island of Nevis. This program comes to you every Thursday evening from 8 to 9:30 p.m. with a rebroadcast on Nevis Television every Sunday evening from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Folks, I am pleased to have as my guest this evening the Honorable Utrant Troy Joval Tajida Liberd, Minister of Education, Information Technology and Library Services. Honorable